the sewing studio on not a fourth Saturday. This is Friday the 16th. And you probably all know this, but I'll just say it anyway. My daughter's getting married the day after the fourth Saturday, and I decided it's a little too much to try to get both things on the weekend. So here we are. I've got lots of great content, including this quilt behind me and lots of other stuff. Love questions, so please give me your questions. Please let me know where you're watching from. And I've got a couple classes I wanted to tell you about real quick. We just put up the picture of the attic windows quilt, and that is going to be on June 12th. I got lots of openings on that. So, or did you do it or no? Oh, okay. I'm looking at the wrong screen. Okay, so we're going to put up attic windows, and that is June 12th, and would love to see you there. It's a technique that I have taught before, but it's been maybe a year, and I had some requests to teach it again. And so we're going to do that again. And so we're going to, Gabriella is working as fast as she can to overlay that quilt on there for me. Sorry, I caught her by surprise. Attic windows. Let's see, how many have we got here this morning? 23 people. Okay, is that it? It's really on now. Okay, so that's the attic windows quilt. And it's a little different than your regular attic windows because usually you can take a panel and cut it up. It's not that kind of quilt. It's got to be fabric that has a large design that you can cut up into triangles. You end up Swiss cheesing your fabric, fussy cutting your fabric to get all those, what's inside the windows. But it's a really cool technique, and there's no Y seams, which is what thrilled me about that particular pattern. No Y seams. Usually attic windows, there's a Y seam in every block. The second thing, while she's getting the pineapple quilt up, I'll talk real quick about the jelly roll rug. I completely forgot to bring it over with me, but it's a very rainbowy. If you look up my classes, it's a very rainbowy looking rug. Of course, you can make it out of any fabric, but it's using strips of batting, strips of fabric. So if you have an old, hello, Ellen, if you have an old jelly roll or just some fabric cut up in the strips, it's a great time to use that. Hello, Beverly. I taught the jelly roll rug like 17 times a few years ago. It's like before COVID, and I thought we were done. And then I had two different people ask me if I could teach it. Oh, sure, I'll teach it. We opened up a class, it filled immediately, opened up two more classes, and the second one is almost full. And that is Monday morning. It's June 23rd, a week before I leave for a couple months. So if you get that one, if you can't get into that one and you want to take it, I'm definitely teaching it twice more in September, and we'll see how it goes from there. And then we're going to put up the pineapple quilt. Here it is, and that is a gorgeous quilt made with a special ruler that helps you trim everything. So as you build outward, you're trimming as you go, which makes, if you've ever tried to make a pineapple ruler without foundation paper or a ruler, forget about it. It's difficult. So this is a great way to use up your scraps. These are actually scraps left over from a Lori Holt block of the month that we did a few years ago, and it came out great. So that is the pineapple quilt on June 11th. And then one more thing, I have a binding class on Monday. It looks like there's 5 seats. So come take my binding class if you've never done that. Okay, without further ado, we are going to talk about my scrappy Quilt of Valor quilt that I just finished this week. It's got a border on both sides, but this spot was so not big enough for everything. Lots of scraps. We're going to talk a lot about scraps today and how to handle scraps. And for those of you that came early to watch the Luminary Quilt, I promise it's coming. It'll probably be at the end. And I just had to sort these quilts size-wise so it wouldn't look weird so I put the biggest ones in the front. Anyway, these are 16 patch blocks, and we're going to talk a lot about 16 patch blocks today. And then the sashing, which we will talk about. And then finally, there's a nice border to finish off those stars. I needed one more border, so we're going to talk all about that. You'll notice that these stars are very wonky. No two stars are the same, and I'll show you how I made that happen. Look down here. I'll show you how I made that happen. Okay, so let's go to the overhead, Gabriella. And the first thing I want to talk about is a 16 patch here's where I sashed it, so we'll talk about that in a minute. So this is a 16 patch, right? And it's really just four patches. And you may have seen this technique before because I love talking about it for many different reasons. But what's going to happen is I'm going to take 4 5-inch squares, and yours could be 6, it could be 4, it could be anything as long as they're squares. I'm going to take 4 5-inch squares and I'm going to turn them into 4 patches, which make my 16 patch blocks. Okay, so this is a great leader ender project. And if you don't know what a leader ender is, whenever you make a chain, and I've got a chain here because I'm going to be talking about the blade saver, but this is a chain. So instead of just sewing 2 pieces of fabric together and cutting your thread, sewing 2 more, cutting your thread, why don't you just give yourself 1/4 to 1/2 an inch in between each one and just sew. It is very satisfying to just keep sewing like this without having to cut your thread. And then eventually, you know, the pile behind your machine gets very tall and you're like, okay, I want to switch to something else. So you cut it, or you maybe leave one piece in there, and that's called your leader ender. And you're going to cut this apart. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it's always good to leave one set of squares or whatever size pieces in your machine. That's called a leader ender. It ends your chain. It hangs onto your thread so your thread doesn't come out of your needle. It is like, I have like 6 different reasons listed in my quilting basics class, but it saves thread, it saves time, and it saves your thread from coming out of your needle. And then also those last beginning and ending stitches there, sometimes when you're using a polyester thread, your stitches, or even any kind of thread really, your first and last stitch come apart sometimes. But if you do leader ender and with poly thread, I leave about 1/2 an inch. That way when I cut it, those stitches don't come out. Whereas if you start it and stop each time, they might come out. Okay, so a leader ender means that you left it in your machine, and the next time you do a chain, it's now, that same piece is now called a leader, and it leads your chain, which is why we call these leader enders. So I always have a pile of leaders enders next to my machine. So when I'm doing my chain, I've got 2 things to sew together, and this is just mindless kind of sewing. Every once in a while, it's a Friday night and I just want to sew in front. I don't want to think, I don't want to build, I don't want to do anything, I just want to sew. So I'll pick up my pile of leaders and enders and just sew those for 20 minutes and I'm a happy camper. So that's what a leader ender is. So how do we get from here to here? Here we go. We're going to put dark, let me just check here. Yep, we're going to put a light piece over a dark piece. You don't have to do light and dark. Yours can be all the same shade. It's just kind of something I do. Actually, that's a petite, so it doesn't matter. I'm going to sew on the left and the right. So that's when I see something like that in my leader ender box, I know I need to sew there. And the next time I need a leader ender, I will sew here. So here we go. The magic of television. We've got those sewn up. Okay, so you can see the black lines. And normally I wouldn't use black thread, but I want you to be able to see it. All right. And then we're going to cut a line that's parallel to these 2 lines. We're going to cut it down the center. Get my handy ruler here. And we're going to find 2.5, because this is a 5-inch square. We're going to cut that in half. We're going to cut that in half. And we end up with something that looks like this and this. And 2 more. I'm sure you can figure that out. See what, right? I closed that up. When I cut it in half, opened it up, and there it is. Okay, so now I've got 4 of these guys. I like to take a dark and put it over the light. And also, because I press my seams to the dark, these are going to nest beautifully. So I'm going to nest that in there. And here's a little trick that some of you may have heard me say, and I saw a pin around here somewhere. Where did I see a pin? Oh, here it is. It's not my favorite pin, but this works. Okay, what I've been doing lately is, okay, I nest this really well. So I'll pin this here, and then I'll come over around here, nest this, and go sew that. So the next time I need a leader ender, this is already pinned. I don't have to rearrange it. It's already ready to go, and I can sew that, take the pin out, and then sew it. So what are we doing here? We're going to sew either side, here and here, here and here. Here it is, magic television. There it is. I've sewn it. Again, I'm going to cut a line in between these two parallel lines. I'm going to cut that line there, and we're going to end up with these guys, right? I put that together. There's 4 different colors, cut it in half, and I end up with a 4 patch. So it's just a few steps. You got 4 lines to sew, and you end up with 4 patches. The handout for what I just went through is the last page. And let's talk about the handout. If you have not got a chance to print it out or bring it up on another device, that's a third handout. I'm looking at all the people that have logged in. My sister Naomi from Spartanburg is here. So Gabriella put up the link for the handout. And if you haven't gotten it yet, now's a good time to click on that. And Cindy, I'm glad you're planning on doing the attic window. So that sounds good. Bernadette, hello Bernadette from, I think you live in Kissimmee, don't you? Okay, and then another link we've got is my favorites page, which is a lot of the products, hopefully most of the products that I'm talking about today. If you don't have them in your stash already, good time to get them because everything is 15% off. All your purchase is 15% off today until Saturday night. So, so back to the handout. So anyway, the third page is this nifty 4-patch technique that I just went through. If you're watching me from Jacksonville, I'm coming to visit you in a few weeks, and we're going to be doing this again. So now you got a head start on all your classmates. Okay. Did I get all the announcements? I got 15% off, handout, and favorites page. Okay. So back to this. Let's do an overhead. Back to the 16 patch. If you're not really sure about your seam allowances and you want to test, I haven't tested this, but looks pretty good. I love my 8.5-inch square. These are my 2 favorite rulers, 6 by 24, and an 8.5-inch square. It's not too big. It's not too small. It fits perfectly with a lot of my scrap quilts. And these are the 2 that sit on my countertop, my cutting table all the time. Yes, I have a lot of other rulers, but they have their own place over in the corner. But these are the 2 that I use every single day. So, and if you haven't heard me wax poetic about the Quilters Select rulers, they are the bomb. They stick like nobody's business. They're not going to move on your fabric. You don't have to put anything special on the bottom. It has a special surface. It's kind of sticky, but not really. It doesn't leave anything on your fabric, of course, but it is not going anywhere. So I know a lot of my students want to bring their 5-pound weight, or they want to figure out a way to keep that ruler from moving. But I forgot my rotary cutter, but I'm just going to pretend I've got a rotary cutter in my hand. If you're right-handed, you're going to cut with your right hand. Your left hand is always, it's never like this. This is what I see 99% of the time up here. It's just like a human nature thing to do. I see it on YouTube. I see it everywhere. And that's really not what don't worry about it, Gabriella. I'll just pretend. Anyway, your left hand, if you're right-handed to cut, your left hand should be half on and half off the ruler. Not like this, not like this, just very natural. But if you have a long cut and if you're a little bit short, you may want to stop, walk your hand up here and finish the cut. When people are in class, I'm constantly reminding them, nope, not this. Where's that hand supposed to be? And this is what's going to make you successful. You don't need a 5-pound weight. You don't need anything else up there. Between the stickiness of this ruler and the hand halfway off your ruler, you're going to be in great shape. So back to this. If you wanted to trim it off, now's a good time to do that. But once you get pretty good at sewing these, you won't need to. Let's take a look at this quilt again. So the quilt has sashing. You could put up all your pieces on your design wall and then start pulling them down and sew sashing on it. But here's an idea that, let's get back to the overhead. So instead of sashing it after you design it, go ahead, you're going to sash them all the same. So I sashed each one, and then all I have to do when the quilt is all sewn together is sash the whole left side and the whole top, and it's done. So I want to talk about these stars here. As you can see, this is only a partial star. So I take an 8.5-inch piece of fabric that matches my square. And here's where the wonkiness comes in. These are 2.5-inch squares. I'm going to cut some of them in half to make, into diagonal half to make this happen. You could be very, very good about it and have exactly, you know, sew it exactly right on. You'll have to do a little trimming. But what I like to do is just offset it a little bit, either that way or this way. And as you can see, you can offset it all different ways. And let's get back to the quilt again. My husband, as soon as he saw this quilt, I showed him the top. He's like, that's very twinkly. So that's why I call it twinkly stars, because I think those stars just twinkle like crazy on this quilt. This is going to Quilt to Valor. Once I talk about it up in Jacksonville in June, then I'll be handing it over to Marge for Quilt to Valor, because they are always in need of lots of quilts. In case you have a heart for Quilt to Valor, this is a good place to donate your red, white, and blue quilts. You'll notice it's got some other colors besides red, white, and blue. My friend Craig likes to make Quilt to Valor quilts with some yellows and some oranges and some khakis. And so I'm kind of following his example. They're just kind of spread out. I didn't really design it very well. I mean, all my oranges are up here and my yellows are down there, but that's okay. If I hadn't said anything, you probably wouldn't have noticed. But anyway, you can put lots of colors in Quilt to Valor. They don't have to be just red, white, and blue. Back to the table here, Gabriella. So once I've done that on all four corners, and again, this could be a leader ender, and it absolutely is. So I will do these, and then I will do these. And then once I've done that, I set the seam, I open it up, set the seam, open it up, and I'm going to clip the red that's behind there because I don't want it to peek through. And then I'm going to do the other four corners. Sorry, the other two corners. Again, clip the red. And now I'm going to take, again, my ruler. Let's just pretend that's not there. Take my ruler and trim. You're definitely going to want, if you do wonky stars, you definitely have to trim back down to 8.5 by 2.5, which was the original size of the red. Okay. Once you've got these puppies all built, then you can add your little sashing piece that goes here. So you're going to have one piece that goes here and one piece that goes there. And now you've sashed your blocks, and that saves a lot of time. Is there anything I need to be looking at here? Jonathan Jordan, hello, MJ. From Rochester, Minnesota. I missed you too, Joanne. Okay, so I think that's everything I wanted to say about this quilt. I quilted it, well, one more thing. I quilted it with really big honking 5-pointed stars, just freehand. I did not quilt the red. Comment if you think I should quilt the red. I was getting a little tired of this quilt. It's a huge quilt. It's like, I don't know, 78 by 80 something. So it's a little bigger than I wanted it to be, but so there it is. Anyway, so I just quilted these guys because there's so many seams. You know me, if there's lots of seams, I'm going to hit it with as much quilting right on the seam allowance as I can. I want to knock those mountains down. So that's, yeah. And then finally, once I did all the red and white sashing, I realized if I want those last edges of stars to finish up, I had to put blue there. And that all of that is on the pattern, how to do that. But that's basically a square blue with two starry legs, and then a full piece of blue, and then another little square with 2 legs and so forth. So a pretty simple border. I used my last of my red, white, and blue stripe for the binding, which I absolutely love stripes. You guys know that. I wanted to talk a little bit more about scrap management. So hang on here. I brought just a sample of the boxes in my sewing room. I kind of surprised myself how many, I didn't realize I had so many of these. So when I've got a little IKEA cubbyhole thing underneath my roomy board, my ironing board. And every time I finish a quilt, you're going to see this fabric in a minute. Every time I finish a quilt and it's just got some odd sizes that I don't want it to go into my stash. This just isn't big enough to go into my stash. So I will throw it in this bucket. When the bucket hits about this level, I think I'll be working on this tonight. When it hits this level, I pull it out and start processing all my scraps. And here's how I do it. Your mileage may vary. And I've had many people asking me lately, what do you do with all your scraps? So I thought I'd do a quick little demo on what I do with my scraps. So for this guy, he is long, charm pack for the 16 patch. Yes, Ellen, you absolutely could. But I'm going to show you some ways to get pieces without having to get a charm pack. But yes, charm packs work great. Those are 2.5-inch squares. They are. So anyway, this is a pretty long piece. So I'm probably going to cut a 2.5-inch strip out of it, you know, as long as I can go, because I have a box. They're all labeled. Here's my box of 2.5-inch strips, and they're all different colors and lots of whites and lights and blues. A few months ago, I pulled everything out and I sorted them, and I pulled out all my pinks and reds, I think. So this is what's left. And then, you know, if I decide, oh, I want to make a blue quilt, I could pull out on my blue quilts. But you can absolutely make it just a super scrappy quilt that has all different colors. So there's my 2.5-inch strips. So then the next piece, well, that's another long piece. So I got some shorter pieces. I'm going to talk for a second about an AccuQuilt cutter. I realize we don't sell them, but I know a lot of you bought them when we did sell them. I happen to have a 2.5-inch strip die and a 1.5-inch strip die. I use them constantly for this type of thing. And then, so let's say we have this guy, all right? Not really big enough for a long strip, but I can cut it into 2.5 by 5-inch pieces. So here's where a lot of my scraps go. And these are sorted by color. So this is my purple pile. Let's do an overhead, please. So my scraps will end up with either 5-inch squares or 2.5 by 5 or 2.5 by 2.5. And as you can imagine, those are great sizes for these leader ender project that I was telling you about, the 4 patches, wherever they are. They're in there somewhere. Anyway, these are going to make 4 patches, and I've probably made 10 different quilts with this 4-patch system, 16 patches, and there's no end in sight. I have all these other ideas. So anytime I'm going through my pile of scraps, I'm looking to make these sizes if I can, and then they get sorted by color. And then when that box, these are actually like from Costco, some kind of food came from Costco. When this gets too full and I can't close the top, it's time to make a quilt with that colorway. I know that some people like to make quilts with all different colors, and I used to do that, and I think I've really narrowed it down. I will make a quilt with just a subset of colors, like reds, pinks, and yellows, or purples and greens, or blues, and a lot of blues. I have a lot of blues. So I'm not done yet. I mean, I could do this. I get the 2.5. I have a box here. Let's go to the regular window. This is my box of 1.5-inch strips, which is getting pretty full, so it's almost time. But then I found another pile that I have labeled really skinny strips. So if they're not 1.5 die cut, then they're really skinny. And I can take this to when I'm to a retreat or when I'm camping and I'm looking to make some mindless strip quilting. That would be good. This would be good for that. So I think this is going to go in my trailer with me, and I'm going to be making some strip quilts this summer. Finally, I think I've mentioned all the different sizes. If it's pretty big, I will save it for rice bags or drawstring bags. I'm talking like anything bigger than like about 8 inches. And then you may have heard me say this before. Oftentimes when I finish a project, if it's a beautiful quilt, I love the colors together, and I have a fair substantial amount of fabric left from that project, instead of dividing it out, let me put the pinks back in my pink pile and my blues, whatever, I will keep all the fabric together. This is from my urban cabins that I made last Christmas. It's actually Christmas fabric, believe it or not. And I'm going to keep it all together. And there's a pretty good amount of fabric left here. And then the next time I want to make a bag or a pillow or something smaller, I can pull out all the different bags from leftover quilts and say, oh, yeah, these colors will work perfectly and there's enough fabric. Or maybe I need to throw in a background fabric or something like that. I've been doing that a lot lately because my bag of fabrics like that is getting large. And so I've been making smaller things with it lately. So I haven't been watching for questions, but if you have any questions about this system, please ask. But I definitely use every single bit. I even use my selvages. I don't have any bags today with my selvages, but if you've ever taken a class with me, you've seen some of my selvage bags, and I've made quilts with selvages. So I keep those separately, sorted by color. Are you waving at me? No. Okay. All right. So that's my scrap system. And one more thing before we talk about the next quilt. We talked about this chain cutting system. So let's do an overhead. This is called the Blade Saver thread cutter. It's a plastic piece, and you install an old rotary blade in it, which is very nice because you can use up your, and this is like the original rotary blade. I've never changed it out. I just keep, if I need to, I'd move it a little bit, but I haven't even needed to do that. So that goes stuck in here. So this is, it's very nice because it travels nicely in its container, but then I can open it up and yeah, let's do the front here. So here we go. And it's super fast and super sharp, pretty much guaranteed not to cut your fabric. So you don't have to get in there with your little scissors and try to get in there. You know, it's just, you kind of just aim it and the rotary blade does the rest. So love this thing. It's on my favorites page. We have different colors, so you get to choose your favorite color. But that is a great way to handle your, your chains. That's what I want to say. Okay. We are going to, yes, Faye, we love our AccuQuilt, and I wish that the company made it easier for us to continue selling it, but they didn't. So we all need to write letters to them and ask them to not be so mean to their vendors. I'm going to take this quilt down, talk about the next quilt, which is the second page on your handout. All right, so this is called, oh, that's a fall. This is called Purple Bliss, and it's your second handout. And maybe you recognize those 16 patches. And then, of course, we have an hourglass block. We have a 16 patch and an hourglass block. And there's just the two blocks that make up this quilt. We back, yep. And then once you back the camera on, well, actually, you could see it from here. Where are you? You're over here. So you still need, we have these blocks, but then you need to finish up your little, diamond there. And so I've got a PDF for that. It's a PDF for a paper foundation piece, flying goose. So if you're interested in making this and you want to finish it off, shoot me an email. My email is at the bottom of every handout. My website's at the bottom of every handout, and I can send you that so you can make this quilt. But again, I pulled out all my purples, and I did the light, dark thing just so I give it a little more contrast and interest. And let's do a quick demo on that hourglass, because some of you may never have made an hourglass before. All right, let's do an overhead. So here's where we're going. That's called an hourglass block, okay? And of course, we've got our 16 patch. You know what that is. All right, so how do we make an hourglass block? We start with two, I don't know, I'm sure it's in the handout, but two squares, let's just say 10 inches. And you're gonna put them right sides together. And I have talked many times about how to make half square triangles, but when they're this big, I'm going to use a Frixion pen and a long ruler. It's been a while since I had my public service announcement about Frixion pens, so let's talk about that for a minute. Love Frixion pens, but I never, ever use them on the front of your fabric. You can use it on the back of your fabric, which is what we're about to do. But they supposedly iron away, which is true, they do. But if you put the quilt in cold weather or a freezer, which I will tell you about in a minute, or the thing will come back, the line will come back, and or I've seen on Facebook people post pictures of quilts that they drew on the front of their quilt with a Frixion pen, ironed it away, and it left like a silver ghost of a line. So for those two reasons, you don't want to use it on the front of your fabric. You just don't know. Quick story. I was hand piecing a quilt, and I drew lines on the back of of the pieces with my, outlined it with the Fix-On pen, and that's how I would hand sew the pieces together. And I was like, oh, I want to see what it looks like. So I pressed it all, and I accidentally pressed too much, and the lines went away. So I put my whole project in the freezer, and an hour later, I pulled it out, and all my lines were back, long enough for me to redraw them. So the freezer does bring the lines back. So yeah, so crafty Westovers, weavers, I'm guessing you're talking about the Fix-On pen, and we do love it, just on the back of your fabric. Okay, so I'm going to draw a line from point to point with my Fix-On pen, and it doesn't have to be a Fix-On pen. Of course, it could be an ink pen. I don't care. It's good. It's going to be on the back of your quilt. You are going to sew 1/4 inch on either side of that line, of course. And then when you cut on the line that you just drew, you're going to end up with 2 half square triangles. I'm sure most of you have done that before. How do we get to the hourglass? This is what we do. And you can either mix it up with other fabrics like I did here. There's 4 different fabrics here, or you can stick with the same 2. Now we're going to lay this one back on top, and you kind of nest it. You kind of feel with your fingertips that you've got them right on top of each other, because of course you press to the dark so you can get these nice and nested in. And now again, we're going to draw a line from this point to that point. So do it again, same thing. You're going to sew on either side of that line. Whoops, you can't see it. You're going to sew on either side of that Fix-On line, right? Close that so it doesn't dry out. So, and I'm just going to peel this back, and there's your hourglass. Isn't that awesome? Great way to make hourglass blocks. So that is a pretty simple stash busting way to make this quilt, Purple Bliss. I actually made this quilt before, and then I hated the way I quilted it, so I gave it away, and I made a whole nother one, and then I ended up with so many blocks. I made a 3rd one, which I sold on Etsy a few years ago, so now I'm back down to 1 again. But I do love purple, so I'm okay with that. I want to talk about, before we get to the next quilt, which I'm going to go ahead and pull this down, but then I'm going to talk about Sewer's Aid. Some of you may be familiar with that product already. So we're going to talk about this one in just a second. Sewer's Aid is a little bottle of, I'm just going to leave it right there. A little bottle of silicone, actually, is what it's made of. And it is useful for so many things. I was looking online today to get some ideas, and I wrote all kinds of things down, all kinds of ideas for you. But it came to mind, I have it, I've had it forever, but I was on my, one of my sewing machines, I was having problems with thread breakage. And I buy good quality thread. It shouldn't be breaking, but maybe it was a little old. Maybe it was 5 or 10 years old. I don't know. So I took my silicone, and let's do that close up again like you had. You run, here you go. So you run a bead of it, just a very small bead of it down. That's probably enough right there. You can see it. A bead of the Sewer's Aid on the thread, and your machine will pick up that silicone, and life is good. You can do it with any size spool, any kind of thread. You can do it on your bobbin. I was also reading where sometimes people do it on their hand sewing needles or machine sewing needles. It's basically just silicone. It's not going to stain your fabric. It's not going to goop up your machine. It's not going to harm your machine in any way. Every single sewer should have a bottle of this, because you never know when you're starting to have problems with metallic thread, with older thread, with cheap thread. This is going to solve a lot of problems. Fancy thread, like I said, metallic. Another thing that people found that it really helped with was skipped stitches, which a lot of us have trouble with, especially on long arms or, specialty machines. Skipped stitches is always a problem. And so I found that the Sewer's Aid, I gotta remember to use it more often, because it's really amazing, and it goes a long, long way. I've had that. I'm gonna grab my drink here. I've had that that bottle for a long time, and I've used it, and it's gonna last me forever. Thank you. So that's on my favorites page, if you are so inclined. Okay. let's talk about the quilt behind me. This is made out of Kaffe Fassett fabrics, by the way, and the quilt pattern is called, I could put it up here if you'd like, Just Can't Cut It. And the reason it's called Just Can't Cut It is because you'll notice as we pan around, some of these blocks are honking big. They're actually 12.5 inches. So if you've got a gorgeous fabric that's too beautiful to cut up into smaller pieces, this is a perfect quilt for it. I'm actually going to start teaching this as my new beginner quilt starting in September. It's a 3-morning class and it's called Just Can't Cut It. And so we have a big 12.5-inch piece, and we're going to talk about how to cut a big piece of fabric in a minute. And then I've got 5 other smaller pieces. So, you know, it's that whole classic, how do I choose fabric? Find that big piece of floral or whatever, fireman, I don't care, whatever it is, a nice big piece of fabric, and then find 5 other pieces of fabric that go well with it. So I pulled the gray for the gray. This is actually a Kaffe polka dot from the gray. And then this one had some smaller pieces, so I actually fussy cut that. It called for 1/4 yard of fabric, but just a tip, if you're going to fussy cut something, cut twice the amount or buy twice the amount, because you're going to want to fussy cut. And actually, these are 6.5-inch squares, and I accidentally cut them 4.5 squares. So I had to, fortunately, I had a 1/2 yard of this fabric, and I was able to find enough pieces and parts to get 6-inch. And then smaller pieces here. You're going to use this piece for, let's scan over here, for your inner binding and, inner border. And then the outer border is back to that original floral fabric. So you're getting quite a bit of that. The backing is a lot of, I bought one piece, one length of it, and then I needed to add some more pieces to get it wide enough for the back. So yeah, it's, and then the binding is, again, that focus fabric. So pretty simple buying the fabric. You buy the one big focus fabric, or you have it in your stash, and then 5 other fabrics, and you're good. It took me a little while because I really wanted just a very, very happy, low volume Kaffe. And if you're familiar with Kaffe Fassett, his stuff is pretty high volume. So I was looking for something that was just sweet and low volume, kind of a baby quilt kind of thing. So anyway, ask your questions if you got them. You know, I love questions. So I want to talk a bit about cutting large pieces of fabric. And I didn't grab any fabric, but that's okay. Let's do an overhead. Quilter Select rulers. Yeah, we talked about that. One thing I didn't say is when you buy a Quilter Select ruler from us, we will give you a $1.99 value pop top with our name on it, Sewing Studio. And they are great for just about any ruler except probably this one. I think they're a little too small for this ruler. I have a different thing that I use to pick up. Why do I like them? Because I'm not going to install this one because this is not mine. I pulled this off the wall, but it allows you to treat the ruler like part of your hand, and it's easier to pick up and move, and you can just cut, and it's just super handy. So I have it on my 8.5 ruler at home, and then I have a different little picker-upper thing for my large ruler. But anyway, you get one of these free. They're $1.99 regularly, but you get them free when you buy a Quilter Select ruler from us, because Mary-Jeanine loves these rulers so much. Let's talk about cutting a 12.5-inch piece of fabric. If you don't own a 12.5-inch ruler, which is what this is, and you're like, I really don't want to spend that much money on one quilt, you know, you're going to use it for other things, but I get it. So instead, you're going to take your fabric, and I'm just hurting myself that I didn't bring, here we go. I'm going to steal some fabric from Gabriella here. This is pretty. Should we talk about this? It looks like a calendar. I'm just going to put this down here, so hold it down. So at this point, I'm going to trim off 2 edges, and then I'm going to use the lines on my ruler to find that 12.5. So once I trim off, let's just say that I've trimmed this off, not very well because it's kind of curvy, but once I've trimmed this off, Then I can use the lines on my ruler, sorry, on my mat. So we count up to 12.5. We count over to 12.5. And then I can use my ruler this way. I rarely use the lines on my mat, but this is one of the times when my fabric is too big for any of the rulers I have. And since this is a panel and it's a little bit cattywampus, if I can just talk about that for a minute. Some of you have purchased panels and you're disappointed that it's cattywampus. I promise you that fabric was loaded onto the bolt and it was not cattywampus, but the way that manufacturer has to load it on, this is what happens. But here's a simple way to fix this problem. So don't feel like you've got to cut it weird to make it work. You're going to hit it with some mist or some spray. You're going to get it nice and wet. And then you're going to start tugging it. You know, hold it here and tug it here and hold it here. And then this was a little off this way. So maybe we're going to tug it a little this way between the mist. And then you're going to hit it with an iron. And maybe it's still not straight. So as it's still hot, you're going to continue to play with it. And it's great to do it on a, well, you don't want to do it on this because it'll melt. But if you have an ironing board, I always recommend getting an ironing board cover that has stripes or plaids. So you can pay attention, you know, you can match things up with the lines. But you're going to just continue to play with this, you know, with heat and water until eventually it will, this is almost fixed and I'm not even have heat and water. It's a little bit off here, but hopefully you got the idea. I talked about that a few years ago because we were all about panels there. And that is still the way to solve that problem. So hopefully that will help you. I didn't mean to do that demo, but since we had it here, I might as well talk about it. If there's any questions, love to hear them. Let me see what else I have to tell you about. I think I'm ready to talk about the Luminary Quilt. So thank you for all your patience. Let's take this down. All right. So I think I showed this to you a month or two, well, a couple months ago, probably in March. We didn't do April. Could you scan, well, big picture, but just go all the way. Yeah, want to see the top of it. The Luminary Quilt is a very modern quilt that have taken a star and have kind of broken it up and put it back together. Somebody asked me the other day where the other half of the star was. And, you know, modern quilts don't necessarily have all the pieces and parts, and that kind of makes it kind of interesting. I quilted it, since we're scanning it up and down, I quilted in a very, very simple way with my walking foot and a Hera marker. I had plans to do some really cool free motion quilting. I was just going to go to town on this thing, and I just kind of ran out of time. Maybe the next time I make it, I'll get on my A game and actually quilt it in an amazing way. If you go on Pinterest or Instagram and look for the Luminary Quilt, you're going to see all kinds of beautiful pieces. Is there a way we can get the camera to go up just a little bit so we can see the top of the quilt? There we go. All right. So I wanted to do a little demo of this quilt before we go. And I encourage you to buy the pattern, which looks like this. Luminary Quilt. It's put out by Allison Glass, which is the company, but the woman who designed it, her name is Jamie Swanson, and she's got some really cool ideas. I went out there and looked for a ruler. So they give you a template. Let's see. Thank you. They give you a template which you can use, but I find it much easier personally to use a ruler. So I went out there looking for a ruler and could not find one. So my handy husband with his laser cutter made me one. And I said, you know what? This is so handy. Can you make me a bunch more? So we've been selling them here at the store. It's called MJ's 45-degree diamond and on our website. But if you just type in, it has a hole for hanging. And if you just type in MJ's ruler, you will find it. But it's also, of course, on my favorites page. Here's one of his prototypes that doesn't have any writing on it, but I wanted to show you something. If you're not familiar with this, this is a first aid tape, basically, that I put on the back of any specialty ruler that doesn't have any amazing grippy stuff like the Quilter Select does. So without the grippy stuff, you know, this slides around pretty well. So it took me a while to find it. I finally found it at a particular Publix, but this is from NextCare, and it's flexible clear tape. And I keep it in my classroom bag because oftentimes people come in with rulers that are moving all over the place. So I put some of that on the back of it. So when you get one of these home, you may want to consider putting that on the back of that and any other quilt that you own. Okay, so that's that. So here is, let's look at the quilt for a minute. Here's one of the pieces, okay? And we're gonna, you're gonna sew all these diamonds together. I'm gonna show you how to create these diamonds now. And then I'm not gonna give you every single possible detail because that's what the pattern's for, but let's get started. We're gonna start with, there's some of my, we're gonna start with, you can tell I need to make another one because I've got all these leftover pieces. I cut a bunch of strips in 1 inch, 1 1/4 inch, 1 3/4, or maybe even some 2-inch pieces. Can we go back up to the quilting again? Sorry, I keep bouncing back and forth. So these diamonds, I think the beauty of this design is that this diamond is not just yellows. It has some pinks and it explodes into the next color, which is aqua. So there's a few aqua pieces, and in between, inside the yellow piece and the aqua piece, there's some pink pieces. So they got kind of a ring of pink. And then the aqua piece has maybe a few pieces from the purple, and the purple has a few aqua pieces from there. So it just kind of explodes and it borrows. So it's so scrappy, you can't even tell where one diamond starts and another one starts and ends and begins. Okay, so back to the, okay, so we're gonna take these pieces, and you could use your template that comes out of the pattern, and I'm just gonna lay these down here, and maybe I've got some aqua pieces, and maybe I'm going to start with get some blues in here, and we just keep building until you've covered this piece, and then we're going to take it to the machine and sew them together. And that's actually what I like to use my design boards. If you're not familiar with these design boards, basically batting, foam board, and some binding that goes around the edge. If you're interested in making one, I love these things. I use them all the time now that I've discovered them. But the design boards, you do a YouTube on Lori Holt's design boards, and there's a million different videos out there how to make them. So this is just a way to carry your block from your ironing board to your sewing, to your cutting, and back and forth without all the pieces fluttering away. So I'm going to go ahead and sew that together. So I'm going to end up with this. Okay. This is where I'm going to, not ready to cut a diamond yet because there's not enough pieces. So I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to cut it in all different ways. I'm going to cut some pieces like this and some pieces like this. So I end up with, let me pull out another design board. You can tell I've used it because it's covered with little bits of thread. So I'm going to end up with pieces like this. As you can see, they're cut all different angles, okay? And then I'm going to, again, put down my piece here to figure out how they're going to end up. See, that's just like it, so I don't want that one. I made a mistake. On this one, there's no need to put that on there because we're not ready for that. So you're just sewing pieces together. You're just sewing strips. And now I need something that's fat on the other side just to kind of take advantage, of that. So I'm going to sew those together. And then finally, I think I had one that's maybe not. Maybe I don't have one that's all sewn together. I should, but I don't. So let's pretend that's all sewn together. I'm going to take my 45-degree diamond and I'm going to, let's pretend it's all sewn together, and I'm going to cut that out. Now, sometimes as I was working with this, I had a little piece over here. I just needed a little bit more. So I just sew a little scrap on there. It's probably going to end up in the seam allowance anyway, but it needs to be the full size. So you just add a little piece there. So I have to say, this quilt it just made me happy the entire time I was building it. Let's go back up to the quilt here. There's not too many times when I'm making a quilt, that's all I can think about. I'm mowing the grass, I'm making dinner, whatever I'm doing, I'm thinking about this quilt. It took probably a week to make. Probably should have taken a lot less time, but I was kind of spreading it out to just spread the joy. And it just made me very happy. It's just a fun quilt to make. And I'm definitely going to be making more. As you can see, I've got some extra blocks to use up. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and start making another one. You can use any colorway. I kind of use the colorway in the pattern a little bit, but it's a little bit different. And if you go out, if you're just don't know what to do with color, go out to Pinterest or Instagram and see what everybody else is doing, and you get some really nifty ideas. How do you fasten the fabric on your design board? So if you're talking about this design board, it's batting. It's leftover pieces of batting, fabric on your design board. So yeah, so the batting, literally just some Elmer's glue. I do a little Z of Elmer's glue. And then who has the info on creating it? Again, if you go to YouTube and type in Lori Holt design board or just design board for quilting, I'm sure you will find lots of different demos. I've had people tell me they literally use their sewing machine to sew the binding on. I personally use hot glue, but I've also used tape, fusible tape, like 1/4 of an inch tape, laid that down and pressed it down. So there's lots of choices on to make it. Some people don't even do the binding. They just put batting on foam board and done with it. And by the way, don't buy your foam board at Office Depot or Staples or whatever is open these days. Dollar Tree, $1.25, you get a 20 by 30 piece, and you can get, 6 of these out of one. This is a 10-inch square. I also have 15-inch squares. So I get 2 of the 15-inch squares out of a Dollar Tree board, but I can get 6 of these. So this is my favorite size, but I also have a larger one too that I pull out sometimes. So good question. Thank you for the question. One more time, we have 15% off everything you buy online today. Or if you come into the store and mention it or show it to us on your phone, you get 15% off. The code is TTT. The handout is in the comments as well. So yes, so the discount is until tomorrow night at midnight. I think that's everything I wanted to say. And wow, we went longer than didn't even do an hour. So we got you. Now you can go off and do something fun. All right, thanks for joining me. Since there's no more questions, I will bid you adieu, and I will see you in June on the 4th Saturday of the month. Take care. Bye-bye.